So, yeah, what I basically used to do, let me turn up the grid so we can see this a little better, is I'd basically start with a single poly. So I usually have kind of like one division in the middle, and then essentially lay this out like so. And in this case, I believe in this version of Maya and the last couple versions, you can hold shift and it'll basically extrude out. And so you'd start to kind of like, drag out your kind of shapes for the mouth. So I just start with a simple poly with a division in the middle. I have object X symmetry on. And again, this is sort of like comparable to this sort of topology that you sort of want to see. So again, I usually have 4 loops that I like to have come out of the corner of the mouth. So something like this. And then I try to mirror the top and bottom edge loops basically. So I want the same number, right? So there's 4 for the corner, and then there's basically going to be, I don't know how many loops I have here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So in through this section, so I guess a total of about 8 or 7 loops on this side. So shift and drag out, and again, I want to angle it just right. Shift and drag out. So again, I'm kind of mirroring the upper and lower lip. This is again to make sure you have kind of nice even topology throughout the mouth basically. Sometimes as you work you will need to add or maybe subtract some loops. I can drag in here for the final loop. And I will turn off symmetry and just weld these things together. So I'll just go to merge verts, merge to center, and then just hit G to repeat the last command. And then it's really a matter of, trying to get this stuff. I'm going to actually maybe start by scaling it flat. And then I can take sort of like the lower, again, I'll probably switch X symmetry on again. Something else you can do too, right? If you hit B, B is like soft select, which you can get to. All right, so if I hit B, it's turning it off and on, off and on. If you go to the modeling toolkit, I believe, where is it? Soft selection here. So it's basically turning it off and on. And if you hold B and click and drag, you can affect the area. You can see the shortcut thing going crazy. But you can affect the area of where that kind of falls off. So usually the lower lip kind of is under the upper lip. So I tend to treat the kind of outer edge as like the protruding edge of the lip. So I'll pull this out and maybe hold B and just scale this up a bit more and grab a bit more of that upper lip. So it protrudes out a bit. Usually the corners too, I kind of like them to sort of almost like rotate back and in, and then I'll pull them back because there's a bit of a rounded shape here. You want to almost imagine it like a bit of a cone almost. So let's grab those middle sections again, just kind of round things out a little bit better. There we go. So right, it's if you're starting from scratch, it's all about just like in sculpting, right? We want to get the primary forms sort of done. And so I usually kind of treat the outer portion of the lips as like all right, so this is the lip line. If this is the lip line, the corners actually need to come in quite a bit. So I'm going to grab these corners and actually scale them down. So usually what I do is I would sort of scale these in a little bit tighter, move them in a little bit tighter. And then the lips, this happens actually anatomically. A lot of people think, you look at lips, so maybe I'll go in here. Let's just say we look at like a cartoony face. Like the typical way to draw cartoon characters is that they have a perfectly sharp corner of the mouth, right? And when you see like a truly human face, it kind of looks that way too, right? Like the lips seem to almost disappear into a sharp point. But what actually happens is the lip actually kind of turns and folds inside the mouth. So I would say for cartoon characters or human characters, it's a good idea to kind of almost like turn or rotate that edge loop in. So I'll come back to that in a second. So let's say I'll do mouth open so I can sort of see that. But if you had a mirror or something or your camera, right, that lip line continues, and like I said, it turns into the mouth. But when you open your mouth wide, you see that lip kind of fold or turn outwards. Then you can see that the lip actually just continues. It just, like I said, it just sort of turns into the mouth. So when I do something like this, maybe I'll hit B and turn off the soft select. I will kind of tuck it in and then sort of back, right? So that's the lip folding into the mouth, basically. Again, this is old school modeling, but if you're like drawing your topology with quad draw, if you're doing like Z-Remesh and ZBrush, then you want to kind of remember that these loops continue, right? They're sort of continuous. And if I grab around, the great thing is I've got a continuous set of loops now. And usually like I said, for a rounded shape or a crease, I will have 3 loops. So if I go to connect, shift right click, connect. All right, what's great about this now is that I can sort of say, okay, I'm going to form the upper lips here and sort of decide where do they go. Maybe I'll scale these a bit flatter. Take the lower lips, and these need to come up a bit, right? The lower portion of the lips. So let's scale that flat. These are definitely kind of already, they're fairly large, and they look somewhat feminine already, so that, I guess I'm going to just follow in that direction. And so these things need to kind of come in to contact with each other, right? So I'll grab maybe just the outermost loops here and kind of pull them down and in. And if you hit 3, you're going to see the smooth results, right? So like I said, when you have 3 loops, you can actually form either a crease or indentation, or you can provide a sort of plumpness or sort of shape to things. So let me pull this close, pull this up. 3, yeah, it's basically a smooth preview, right? So, and then again, this lower lip doesn't quite have a shape yet, so I would, let's say, grab this and pull it out, right? Because it needs some definition. And again, we want the upper lip and lower lip. I'm kind of viewing this at a weird angle, so let me just actually rotate the whole thing. I'm going to go and, I guess, rotate this 90 on X, so it's like facing forward now, instead of just... right? So we want the upper lip, generally speaking, it doesn't always have to be this way, but the upper lip should generally overhang the lower, right? So it's really, really kind of simple ideas to help define that area. You know, you might pull the middle out a little more on the upper lip, maybe pull it down a bit more. So again, very, very sort of simple ideas to get this stuff to work properly. And again, I might pull these edges at the corner up and over. So this would define the lip line as well. So if you want to get a bit more of that crisp sharpness, then you kind of just want to scale these points down and in a bit, right? And then tuck these points, like I said, the lip folds into the mouth. So again, this is my sort of general take on it. Yeah, I've got that little corner, even just that corner edge I can kind of pull in, right? So we kind of get that curling in or turning into the mouth happening there. So then I can maybe pull that forward a bit as well. And then for the rest of the loops, right, it's really just about, and I think I may have to turn off X symmetry for this, so let me just, yeah, there we go. Shift, scale, pull it back. You know, these loops have to radiate out, like I said, a little bit more evenly, so I'll go back to symmetry on. So I'll kind of fan these up. And again, this is an old school method, so you know, this wouldn't necessarily work the way you guys are working with ZBrush and quad draw and stuff like that, but we want these to kind of fan out so we don't get like a cluster of edges. When you have a cluster of edges somewhere, what can happen, as I mentioned a bit earlier, is that you get kind of like pinching or creasing, right? When you have 3 or more edges clustered together, you get that kind of a weird rippling effect, so you just have to pay attention to the shape. But so anyways, this is like, again, old school techniques for creating a lip, let's say, or a mouth area or a face in low poly. And again, I used to, yeah, just sort of scale this a bit flatter and sort of pull it in a bit more because the face kind of rounds out a bit. If you got your lip line, if you know where your lip line should be, here, let's pull this back. So let's say that's the lip line. Maybe I'll pull this down and forward a bit, maybe rotate it a little bit. There we go. Take that, and you could try to crease it. Again, I probably need to adjust the shape, I think, down here. So I'll kind of pull it up and over, kind of rotate that a bit. Then we could say bevel. So usually I would do 2 segments and then bring them very, very close together. right? So you'd start to get kind of a lip line. The corners need a bit of work here, but I think you basically get the point, right? That when it comes to topology, you want to kind of keep nice, clean quads everywhere. And that will help you kind of define the shape, the loops, get really good animation ready sort of mesh, right? Yeah, for things like this area, if anybody's interested, that's, yeah, I would do something like extrude. So I do an extrude, but just with like an offset basically. And then this would be deleted. Pull those edges up a bit. And you stick these faces kind of down and in. Right? Again, I won't be doing the proper shape stuff right now, but I do maybe a connect to help kind of sharpen that area right there. Right? So that's kind of old school face modeling techniques. And the eye would be done the same way. So it's really just kind of tracing the shape. You know, again, you could do 3 loops in the corners. Sometimes most of the time I do 4. Sometimes I do 3 if there's like a poly limit. And again, I try to match the number of loops in the upper and lower eyelid, you know. And so we want sort of circular loops that radiate out, right? Like a ripple almost, coming out from the nose, coming out from the mouth, coming out from the eyes. And I usually keep the eyes, the mouth, and the nostrils open. Main reason is it's super simple to sort of put extra loops. Like when you don't know where edges should go, they can just be kind of tucked into those openings and then capped and hidden away, right? The extra loops that are kind of frustrating you can run them into the mouth, and then when you extrude it out, you can simplify the mesh and kind of tuck away any weird triangles or excess kind of mesh into those areas, because they just get hidden. You don't see them after a while. So I can show you guys, yeah, maybe just a quick nostril as well. Start with another simple plane. This one I'll probably, I guess, move off to the side. So I'll just make this a simple 1x1. Yeah. Again, with a nostril, it's pretty much the same thing. Like you basically just need an opening. So let's see if I go, yeah. So right now I'll just kind of focus on the sort of nostril opening, I guess. Or, you know, usually if I start with a mouth, I would actually extrude from this area. So it would just be kind of like shift drag to kind of get the profile, shift drag, right? So I'm shift dragging, extruding out as I go, right? And then you sort of will find an area from here usually where you, again, looking from a bottom profile view, shift drag a handful of times. And then you'd have to eventually connect up to your nostril. You know, sometimes too, like if you're dragging, you might want to kind of slope it down as well and kind of rotate into position. So yeah, we'll pull it down and pull it a bit wider. So this stuff would probably extend, you know, start to extend up. Let's see, I'll grab these edges here too. So I often use like rotation and scaling and stuff in this sort of work. But again, I haven't had to do it in a long time just because the tools are so much better. So I'll do a little target weld here. I'll do this in low poly there. Target weld that to that. And also, if you're ever dealing with low res stuff and you need to kind of relax or average some stuff out, what you can do is grab some of your vertices and say shift right click and go to average vertices, and it kind of like smooths things out. It kind of gives you like a gradual blending effect. That's really, really nice. So let's see, yeah, maybe I'll extrude this edge up as well. So I'll go back to the move tool. But again, I think it's just a helpful exercise for you guys to see. Let me just target weld here to here. And then I think I'll bridge maybe from here to here if I can. We'll see if that works. Or maybe, yeah, shift drag one more time. And then I'll target weld the vertices, or average the verts here. Merge verts to center, there. And then, yeah, let's take this edge and extrude out. And target weld, there. So yeah, like I said, this is kind of the old school method of building a face. So you have to kind of shape your nostril, shape your nose area. So I'm just going to grab these to kind of pull out a bit. And pull this one down and in. So I'm not worried, about the nostril section itself yet. Like, I'm kind of worried about the nose shape more than anything. And like I said, basically what you have is, so I'll shift scale. Oops, what is going on there? Let me double check my tool. Smart duplicate, shift drag. Okay, let's see. That's interesting. This might be an instance where this tool is actually kind of broken, but in this case, I'll just do a regular extrude edge, and I'll do it based on, I guess, a thickness, which will kind of pull it up and in. It looks a little bit warped, so I'm going to just probably straighten it out by, yeah. It's weird. Why is it pulling everything now? Strange. Well, let's convert this to verts. Okay, to vertices, and then I'll do an average on these just to kind of soften them out, and then I'll hit G to repeat the command a bit, so then we can kind of, yeah, there we go. Help sort of smooth that out a bit. Usually you'll see some weird movement like that if there's a constraint, but I don't see a constraint on this anywhere. So that's a bit of an odd thing happening. I may just average this area out too because it's looking a little weirdly lumpy. Oops, don't want to merge, I want to average there. Right, so like I said, if you've got loops that are kind of confusing, confounding, you can kind of just tuck them in, right? If they're not working the way you want, you can kind of multi-cut in and say, you know what, I can feed those loops into an open mouth and then close the cavity later. If I need a loop here, I can, kind of tuck it into that nose later. So I often like to work low, whether it's this old school method that I used to do. So we can shift drag in now, right? Scale it. Usually I would scale in a bit because the nose tends to kind of close up and in a bit. Usually moves inwards as well and back also. So then, once I've kind of done figuring out where all these loops need to kind of be, where they should kind of turn in, if I'm hiding them in a nostril or an eye area or a mouth area, then you can literally just kind of do probably a cap would be okay, right? So we just go into fill hole. I would take that face and basically extrude it once up and in. And then just simply, in face mode, go merge faces to center. So, if you're doing your quad draw, this could be kind of a finishing step to completing the back end of a mouth, the inside of a nostril. With an eye, usually I kind of just extrude the eye, like the sharpness of the eyelid back and in a bit. So it sort of forms like a cup shape. But so you can leave the nostrils open while you quad draw, but then once you're kind of done that, you do a projection, let's say, then you could kind of extrude back into the nostril and do any touch-ups after you've before doing the kind of closing off of that. For the mouth, I've mentioned this a little bit before. If you're taking the mouth, you shift drag it back, and usually what I like to do is take the upper loop in this case. So I'll take that. I think that's the upper loop. It's not always easy to tell when you're grabbing this stuff. But then I'll start to kind of pull it up. Take the bottom loop. Pull it down. And remember, because there's smoothing going on, you may have to take your upper and lower loops and kind of nudge them into position so they remain kind of closed. Let's grab this here as well. All right, so depending on how you shape that inner mouth cavity, you may have to kind of tweak the lips when they're closed. It's a bit of a lumpy looking mouth, but I have to fix that later if I were to keep it. So this is another thing too, if I have a mouth shape issue, a lot of times when I've got these extra loops, I would actually kind of undo them, take them back out, and then fix my weird mouth shape stuff, and then kind of come back in and adjust. So at a certain point too, the mouth cavity, I will kind of just, for simplicity's sake, just kind of like scale things nice and flat. So in this case, I'm scaling just vertically. So when you guys, after quad draw, like I said, you'll start to kind of do this sort of modeling. You may have to shift and scale a second time. So usually I create kind of like a thickness that exists. So there is a bit of a thickness to the lip, but you don't want this stuff to be too close to the front of the face. because what'll happen is it can go through itself, right? And you don't want that to happen during animation. So, oh yeah, looks like I've got this little poly that I made sticking in there. Okay, so I will tend to make it square. I also tend to simplify the mesh, so I would take like usually 2 edges, go to merge to center, and then take out a center edge. So I do that on the inside of the mouth cavity, and that just helps to simplify basically the mouth region. I'll probably wait to do that later because it's kind of warping the shape so far. So the idea is that we don't need, anywhere where you don't need a ton of mesh, you can basically simplify the model. So this keeps it quad based right here, right? So technically it's still 4-sided. It's clean. Again, a lot of people say, you know, we don't need to worry about keeping things quad based, but for me, I still find it's the fastest, most efficient way to work. So again, I'm kind of turning stuff into quads, and that way when I shift extrude back, at this point I would scale this flat. Okay, and then if you hit 3, this is what the mouth cavity looks like. You want your teeth and gums to fit, so you may have to adjust for height inside, right? Lift this up a bit more. Like I said, at this point I could do more simplification of the mouth cavity. Merge collapse to center, take out that edge, because it's just a simple backing area mainly. So I'll take that and do the same thing, merge to center. Actually, I don't like what it's doing to the shape, so I'll just leave that alone for now. So take that edge, shift drag back one more time. And then if you want to, again, like there's a few ways to deal with this. You can kind of shift and scale in and pull this, pull it back. Maybe I'll scale the height back up a little bit. So some people will just leave it like this and close it. If for some reason you need to see inside the mouth, what you can do, let me just shift and pull back and kind of rotate this down and in. And then you, again, sort of, usually the mouth kind of starts to close down a little bit in the back here. So I'll turn off my object symmetry because it kind of skews the pivot a bit, so I'll just scale it from the center point there like that. And then, again, if if for some reason you have an animation traveling down the throat, kind of reminds me of the Matrix. I think that's like the only time where you see a camera like fly into somebody's throat, basically. Like Neo takes the pill and gets covered in metal, basically. So they would have had to build all the way down to here. Usually I go kind of back to, back to about this depth, and then you can literally just sort of scale it down. Sorry, I'll do it from the center without the object X. So I'll have to reselect, scale in, and then again, you can just do fill hole. If you want to kind of connect all this stuff, the laziest way to do it is to just go to edit mesh, and then I believe where is it? Triangulate or mesh? Mesh triangulate, right? It'll just kind of throw in a bunch of triangles. You know, that works okay. Let's kind of peek inside the mouth here if we can. It's going to be hard to see probably. There. Now if you wanted to, you could clean up the triangles just kind of manually. Again, it's not the most essential thing, but it will give you some slightly better smoothing results in the back, right? So if you ever have to see the back of the throat for some reason, you know, that's one way you can kind of just sort of help clean that up. Of course, as a final step here, let me undo. Instead of bridge it, you know, instead of just capping it, you could always say, I'm going to take like the top 4 edges, find 4 bottom edges down here, and just say, I'm going to bridge instead, right? Just to kind of create a neater situation there. And then you can just do fill hole, or, you know, maybe collapse an edge or something. Like maybe I'd just collapse this edge and this edge. Oops, I don't want to merge to center. I'll go to collapse edge. There we go. So that kind of tidies it up back there. Right. So those are just some like basic techniques. You will have to kind of do a bit of that style of modeling. Definitely not for the face, but once you get into like the opening of the mouth, the opening of the nostril, you know, in the eye area, you can kind of, usually I have a little thickness like the mouth. I extrude back and behind the eye just in case there's a gap between the eyeball and the front side and the top edge of the eyelids. So I will kind of extrude back and in, almost like a little suction cup shape, but not too far. Usually the equivalent of like maybe a centimeter, 1 or 2 loops inside that you don't ever really see, but are there to help keep that mesh against the eyeball, right?